Hey guys, welcome back to Now Reading with Bud Gaines. We are continuing Aren Chronicles, Prelude to Vortex of Souls, the stories of Amane, Toshiro, and Kyra. Starting on page 93, we left off last time with Amane and Toshiro heading back to the encampment with Fujimoto, and then the two of them going to Toru to get mission brief, and that's where we're going to start today. The two of them walked to where Amane's group was located and waited for them. Toru stood out in front, waiting for them to arrive, and the rest of the members were lined up on the side. Toru pointed at where he wanted them to stand. "Line up," Toru stated. "We have another new recruit. His name is Toshiro, and his last name doesn't matter. I've been informed that Amane and Toshiro have been given our mission already. I'll fill the rest of you in." He cleared his throat and began speaking again. "We're going after two generals who are riding in a carriage. They're heading north right now looking for reinforcements, a possible strategic point behind us. Pincer attacks will be more likely if they can get behind us. The two generals aren't far from where we are right now. The generals are escorted by a group of 20 skilled swordsmen, and we have 7. This will not be easy. If you can attack from a distance, stay hidden. Amane, if you can remove a singular wheel with your technique, it would help greatly." As I mentioned to the general, the skill is mostly usable, but I need to practice with it. "I'll do whatever I can, though," Amane responded. "That's good enough for me," Toru stated before redirecting his speech back to everyone else. "Those who can't attack long distance or use a bow will be waiting further up for the carriage to stop. We'll take out who we can before you can join in the fight." He nodded his head with a serious look on his face. "That's all. And since we've all been briefed, let's go," he commanded. Money grabbed his bow and quiver and put them around his body. Toshiro only had what he came with and left his bag behind in Amane's tent while keeping only a sword. Toru and one other soldier had a bow and everyone else had a sword. Their trek north begins directed towards the mountains. The road was long, bathed in blood, and filled with deceased enemies and allies alike. Battles had taken place all over the quadrant, and they now were after retaking some areas. These generals were going to get more of a battle than they bargained for. The trek led them through the mud, water, and blood. Bodies littered the area, and the swords that drank the blood of their enemies' victims still remained in their bodies. This path they were on was a hellscape of corpses and pain, a sight no one should have to see or go through in their life. The war was killing everything, and it had to be ended. These types of action disgraced all involved and all who saw it. This made the entire quadrant look awful and disgusting to outsiders and insiders alike. After trekking through the underworld to get to their destination, the small group of soldiers finally reached their destination, being just slightly ahead of the generals. "Amane, you're up," Toru instructed him quietly. Amane nodded his head and ran back behind the carriage. He removed his sword and began charging energy into it. If you could just work this one time, he thought to himself. The sword turned red with energy as he lowered it to a 45-degree angle and held it with both hands. He focused intently on it as it charged. He felt it resonate in his mind, alerting him to it reaching full capacity. He swung his sword upward, sending a red crescent of energy flying at the carriage's wheel. Yes, 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 he thought to himself. The crescent of energy connected with the legs of the enemy soldiers, removing the legs as it passed through, then hitting the carriage wheel and taking a chunk out of it from before fizzling out. Amane darted back into the darkness and drew his bow ready for the next attack. He looked over to where Toru and saw him giving a thumbs up. Toshiro was in awe of the technique, as he had never seen something like that before. "What's going on?" the first general yelled out. The second general climbed out of the carriage to see the wheel. "We were attacked, it seems. Our wheel is messed up and a few of our guys are injured. The assassination squad is here." "To arms," he shouted to his uninjured men. Monty stuck his head up from the bush he was hiding in and shot an arrow from his bow at one of the guards. Second arrow flew from across the way. A third and final arrow from above. Each of the arrows were blocked by one sword. "Shit," Toru thought to himself. "This isn't good." He looked behind himself to see the others, shook his head and pointed back, which was a signal to retreat. During the time he was doing this, Toru was signaling his men. Amane couldn't see him from the angle he was at. If the arrows weren't going to do it, he was going to do it by force himself. He set his bow down in the woods and walked out into the road. The first general laughed as Amane came out of the bushes. "You're a little young to be on the assassination squad for Fujimoto." "I'm being fast-tracked," Amane replied sarcastically. "I may be young, but I'm strong enough to take out 3 of your soldiers along with your wheel, strategically stranding you here." Toshiro thought to himself, "What are you doing? Get back here." "Why did you step out here to face us?" the second general questioned. Amane shrugged. "You could say hard-headed and stubborn runs in my family." Toru pulled his bow back out and fired another arrow at the soldiers who were watching Amane and hit one in the chest. He moved lower and fired another arrow, hitting the next one in the throat. That was 2 down. Another arrow fired into the knee of a soldier, followed by a second in the neck. 6 men down and 16 to go, including the general. Amane held his sword at the ready. "You generals should be a lot better than your ground soldiers, right? That's a challenge I'll take on." "You don't deserve to fight with us, boy. We are beyond your skill level," the first general stated. "Not even a chance to fight us, kid," the second retorted with a smirk on his face. "Give it a few decades." Another 2 arrows were fired at the generals, who didn't even blink. The arrows came flying at them and they gently moved out of the way. Both generals had speed and confidence along with their power. This was something Amane could feel now that they had been forced to move faster than he expected from them. "Definitely stronger than I anticipated," Amane thought to himself. "Still, it has to be done." "Attack!" the first general yelled out as he commanded his men to attack Amane, the only one visible. The first wave was just a few soldiers, and Amane was blocking attacks attacks left and right. The power gap between the soldiers and the generals was large enough for Amane to tell with ease. Amane dodged and swung his blade, cutting one soldier's hand off before impaling him in the chest. Attacked from behind and kicked in the back, he caught his balance by stabbing his blade into the dirt. Amane leaned back just in time to avoid their quick attacks and forced them into a confrontation where they stabbed each other as he dodged their swings. He removed his sword from the ground and started walking towards the rest. 13 enemies left. Toru yelled out, "Infantry attack!" Toshiro and the other two guys ran out in the battle. The clanging of swords could be heard as Amane and Toshiro, along with the others, were fighting with the enemy soldiers. It was an uphill battle for the assassination squad. "Toshiro, duck!" Amane yelled as he punched the guy in the face who was beside Toshiro while gripping onto his hilt. "Nice," Toshiro said calmly as he focused on stabbing a guy behind Amane. "Looks like we're saving each other today. Just like old times, right?" Amane shouted, recalling the events from 3 years ago, their first real battle. 11 remained. 2 soldiers accompanying them went down quickly as they were surrounded and taken out. Amane and Toshiro were the 2 left on the battleground as the other member stayed hidden right away. The 2 soldiers accompanying them went down quickly as they were surrounded and taken out. Amane and Toshiro were the 2 left on the battleground as the other member stayed hidden right now. Amane took his blade and filled it up with energy to strengthen his sword as he swung through an enemy blade and into a skull, blood spewing from it everywhere and onto him. 10. Toru jumped out of his hiding spot and sped over to the generals, catching one off guard by jumping into his face as a distraction while stabbing him in the chest. A little diversion to remove a figurehead and mark of his skill. He pulled his dagger out of the general's chest and jumped back. 9, and a general down. Toshiro continuously stared at one soldier until his enemy began turning his blade on himself. The murderous intent brought out during a killing stare is known to make the person it's used on forced to kill themselves, a special skill of the Shigekazu clan. Minus making wine, of course. Amane, was that the cold stare? He said, grunting while blocking an incoming attack and pushing the soldier back. "I think so," Toshiro replied in confusion. "I didn't know I could do that yet." "Glad you said that, because I was about to ask you how long you've been able to do that." Amane shook his head. "Poor guy, though." He kicked his opponent in the chest and blocked an attack coming from Toshiro. "Back in the battle, please." Right. Toshiro got his mind back into the battle and out of his ability. He stabbed the man in the stomach that Amane blocked for him. 7 remain, 1 general. "Bowman, get back to the encampment just in case," Toru ordered. Without saying a word, the remaining bowmen disappeared from the battlefield. 7 on 3. The squad was doing quite well against the stronger enemies, but now they were surrounded. The tide could be turning. The remaining general took full command and led the charge against them. His first attack went for Amane first, who was ready for it. He blocked several oncoming attacks, but could feel they were very powerful and full of force. Amane filled the blade with energy and began defending easier while putting more force behind his defense. Toru joined him, blocking the attack and pushing him back out of the engagement. "Amane, you're stronger than that," he grunted as he blocked more attacks. "Refocus your energy, get that armor moving with you and not against you," Toru stated. Amane jumped back further and began refocusing his spiritual energy to its peak again. Immediately, he started moving more fluidly than he was before. His speed was increased from focus, and he made his work of 2 quick soldiers before they noticed that their hands were missing. Toshiro caught another soldier in the cold stare, but it was broken, and the soldier barely pierced his skin. Toshiro's lack of use with the ability meant that it wasn't fully developed currently. Toshiro forcefully finished him off instead by piercing him with his own sword. 5 enemies remained. The remaining 5 enemies were the strongest as they forced the 3 back against the carriage. Amane was in the middle, Toshiro on the right, Toru on his left. This was to be their final stand. "This is going to call for drastic measures, guys. Any tricks left?" Toru asked while holding his sword before him. He was ready to defend himself. "Not for me," Toshiro said as he gripped his hilt tightly in his hands, electing to use both hands instead of just one for better defense. Amane thought for a moment. His blades lowered. "I could test my speed," he said with a wide smirk. "What do you need?" Toru asked bluntly. "A minute to remove my armor," Amane stated confidently, swaying my movements down. Toshiro nodded. "Since we've seen him move at peak energy, let's see how he moves without hindrance." "We'll get you your minute," Toru added, forcing them back with a single swing of his blade. Amane quickly began unlatching his armor's piece. The general closed in on them while Toru and Toshiro were ready to defend. This was going to either be a quick minute or a long minute, depending all on Amane. "Removing your armor is just going to make you an easier kill." The general thought he'd get in one more lecture before he killed the old man and 2 kids with him. Amane nodded. "Sure. But you still have to catch me first." He undid the last latch on the armor, causing it to fall onto the ground with a thud. Amane picked up a second sword and was now dual-wielding, a style that he would develop as time went on. Without a word, he disappeared from sight, only to reappear a few minutes later. The end. "What did you do?" Toshiro asked, highly confused by what he didn't witness. Nothing seemed to change from his perspective. "Same question," Toru replied with equal confusion. "Nothing, it seems," Amane retorted as they all stood there with the same amount of confusion. "It did nothing. All of that posturing was just a waste of—" The general's last words as his head slid down at an angle off the skull. His body fell over limp, and you could see inside of him from above. His tongue was still flapping from the nerves twitching in pain. The remaining soldiers began falling to pieces as well. Screams could be heard as they did so. Horrifying, blood-curdling screams that echoed for miles. 0 enemies remain. "Let's go back," Toru stated as he patted Amane on the back. "Good work." "Thanks," Amane replied. "That was really gross to watch, but you're so fast," Toshiro retorted with deep confusion and surprise in his voice. "It's the training I've been doing with this armor." Amane began putting his armor back on piece by piece. "It's doing more than even I realized, Toshiro." Toru began walking towards their encampment while Amane was getting ready. He knew they would catch up without an issue after seeing that. He was surprised himself at how fast he was, how much faster he was in comparison to his father currently and when he was 18. The progression was astonishing and incomparable. Toru knew that something... Toru! Amane shouted for him. What about the carriage? Loot it. Burn it with the bodies, he replied while waving goodbye, still walking away. His mind set on figuring out what made Amane so different from his father. Toru didn't say it, but he was proud of him. Someone would carry on his teachings after he passes on, whenever that was to be. On it, Amane shouted back. See you soon. Why am I reading that again? Let's just read the whole line. Toshiro sighed and stayed back with Amane to see what he was going to do. What are you going to do? Amane was shuffling through their clothes for currency and non-flammable objects. I'm going to take their stuff. In this situation, they definitely don't need the money anymore, and fighting a war is costly. Take all the money we can get. I know it's weird, but we have to survive by doing this for the time being. They began tossing swords and daggers into a pile to one side of them and looted the bodies into another pile. It wasn't the best of time, but it was a good way to collect some money for the war to remove weapons from the enemy before they could retrieve them. The steel of the blades was durable and high quality. It was a waste to just let them decay in the element. Here, let me help, Toshiro said as he kicked half a skull over to the pile. The general was now among his men and the rest of his body. That was gross, by the way. What was gross? Somebody replied quickly. Watching that guy's head slide apart, Toshiro said, holding back disgust while pointing at the skull. Amane sighed. Yeah, it was. The tongue flapping wasn't exactly pretty either. While they talked, a strange sensation filled them both with a surge of power. Amane began sweating and burning up uncontrollably. Toshiro's temperature began dropping and his breath was visible as his skin turned a pale blue color. A similar reaction they had 3 years ago was happening once again. Amane hit the ground on his left knee and fell over into the pile of bodies. Amane! Toshiro shouted as his body became stiff as if it was frozen. He gritted his teeth and hit the ground hard next to the body. The blood from the bodies was freezing around him. It wasn't long before they both passed out from the exhaustion. Frozen blood and bodies near Toshiro, and bodies that had been burnt mostly to ash under Amane. The night felt as if it was dragging on for both of them, even though they were passed out the entire time. Their bodies were undergoing internal physical change. Toshiro's internal temperature had become extremely low, while Amane's had skyrocketed upward. Their bodies had accepted the new temperatures during the night, as well as new abilities. Amane pushed off the ground with one hand while straining to remove his other from under him. His arm was numb from laying on it all night. Toshiro, where are you? He shouted. Beside you, Amane, he said, slowly getting up from the ground as well. How are you feeling? Hot, Amane replied. What about you? Freezing. Toshiro looked at his skin. The color was light pale blue with small amounts of cool frost steaming off his body. This is weird. It is. Amane looked around. Where are the bodies? I think you burned them like you were told, Toshiro replied jokingly. Amane chuckled lightly. I think you're right. He held his right hand up and a small flame burst forth from his palm. Stop it. Stop. He began shaking his hand, trying to put it out. Amane sighed in relief as it finally went out. Toshiro was laughing while Amane was panicking about the fireball, and following suit created a small ball of ice in his hand. This is really cool. That's enough of that, Amane said with a smile. We should get back. They're probably worried about us, but you just need to chill out, Toshiro replied while laughing. That's not going to get old at all, Amane joked. Amane and Toshiro collected the swords and money that was available. Afterwards, he began walking back towards the camp, mostly in silence as they were both focusing on what had happened and what happened next. Both of them had received elemental abilities that hadn't existed for centuries. The two of them finally returned to the base over a day later, after what happened with the battle and being weakened from exhaustion, but they did make it back. Their new powers coursing within their bodies and abilities for those who came before them. Fujimoto. I'm going to lead a search party to find my son and Toshiro. We'll head back to where they were last and start a search from there. Any questions? No, just a statement. Turn around, Toru stated as he pointed. Fujimoto turned around fully to see them coming up to the gate carrying weapons. He rushed down to his son and Toshiro and went to hug them both at the same time. Step back, Dad, Amane said calmly. What's wrong, Amane? Fujimoto questioned him. I don't want you to get burned, he replied. Burned by what? Fujimoto asked confused. By him, Toshiro responded. Or frostbitten by me. What are you talking about? Fujimoto said cautiously. We don't know how to explain what happened, and we're not exactly controlling it, Amane stated as he dropped the swords on the ground. Be careful. Those are hot. Watch out. These are freezing. He set them on top of the others in the pile. Show me, Fujimoto demanded. Amane and Toshiro both held out their hands. Amane's right hand and Toshiro's left hand, so they were side by side. Amane had a small fireball hovering above his palm, while Toshiro's a small ball of ice above his. It's time, Fujimoto declared. We're going home tomorrow. Toshiro, you should visit your father when we visit Yamazengo. He may have something to help you. He may also want to beat my ass, Toshiro did. Amane made an oops face. Oh yeah, you weren't supposed to be here, he sighed. At least it's only been a couple days, so he'll beat my ass less? Toshiro rolled his eyes. My father is a bit stricter than that. The length of time wouldn't matter. I'll go talk to him. Amane, you go home and visit your mother. I'll go with Toshiro to see Toshin and try to cool the flames, Fujimoto declared with a slight chuckle. Sorry, it just kind of slipped out. Thank you, sir, Toshiro said, bowing his head in respect. Fujimoto smiled at him. Don't worry about it, Toshiro. We'll see how it goes with me there. I can't guarantee it'll be much better, but I'll try. He took a breath. For now, go rest. Amane and Toshiro walked back to their tents that were side by side, now that there was time to put one up for Toshiro. Amane removed his armor, which was surprisingly undamaged. He changed into a black gi with a white octagon on the back and exited the tent. He began walking towards one of the waterfalls in the camp to meditate. He decided he wasn't going to bother Toshiro and let him decide what he wanted to do on his own. He heard rustling from behind him, and Toshiro, who was also in a black gi with a triple sword logo on the back, came running out. Going to the waterfall, Toshiro asked. Going to meditate on this, try to understand what's going on, Amane replied bluntly. Mind if I join you? Toshiro said, smiling. As long as you don't mind sitting in silence, it's time of peace and thinking. Tranquility, used to focus your mind, can also be used to focus your energy. Amane replied in detail, even though he knew that Toshiro meditated as part of his own training. It's what I was going to do, Toshiro answered. Come on, Amane smirked. Together they walked to the waterfall. Questions they had were going to try to answer. Why did these powers awaken? Why did the elemental powers return all of a sudden? Would they continue to awaken in other people? Could they harness these skills and use them effectively? They arrived at the waterfall after several minutes of walking, both removing their jackets from their bodies and hanging them in the tree. They sat next to each other under the waterfall. Amane sat with his legs crossed, his hands resting upside down on his side. Toshiro sat with his legs crossed with his hands together as he was focused. The water from the waterfall crashed down upon them. Small chunks of ice broke off from around Toshiro, while steam formed as water hit Amane. Their new abilities were the start of something old being given life in a new world. Hours of meditation had passed in what felt like a blink of an eye. The two boys were feeling refreshed and rejuvenated, focused, ready and feeling at one with their powers. Still confused about why they were giving them and who gave them to begin with, Amane slid down to the pond below, the waterfall that fed into a small creek. He walked out using the shore and grabbed his sword from the tree. He walked over to an open area and focused his power into the blade. As he did so, his normally slate-gray eyes changed to a vibrant orange as his sword filled with spiritual energy and heat that ignited the blade in fire. He held it down at an angle and slashed upward. The fire energy mixes with the spiritual energy, causing the crescent-shaped wave to be sent flying through the air as an inferno burns through it and streaks through the sky. His eyes returned to normal gray as the energy dissipated. Toshiro felt the surge in heat and approached Amane as he watched the fire energy fly through the air. How did you do that? He questioned. I just focused my spiritual energy into the sword and focused the new abilities on it. I think I'm going to call it the fire blade, Amane replied with a shrug. I don't think I can do that, Amane, Toshiro stated. You just gotta practice well with ice. I think that's your skill. You can do this, Toshiro. Just practice, Amane said confidently. Toshiro nodded his head. I'll do that. Amane and Toshiro grabbed their upper gis from the tree and put them on as they head back to the tents in the camp. Feeling exhausted and refreshed from the training together and meditation, they crashed out on their beds relatively quickly. They had a long, eventful couple of days and were in dire need of sleep, of real sleep. As they slept, Fujimoto planned and packed their belongings for the trip. They were going to finally visit home. Amane after almost half a year, Fujimoto after almost 3.5 years, and Toshiro after a few days of disobeying his father. Fujimoto looked closely at Amane's sword and saw the black burn lines on it. He was learning very fast the amount of damage his son could do if not trained to use his skills properly. Fujimoto planned and packed. An unfamiliar face, but a familiar cloaked figure watched from his tower surrounded by Soul Magical. The sorcerer kept a close eye on the encampment because of Amane. The powers awakened within him and Toshiro, and the sorcerer knew it. The surge of energy was felt all the way from where he was at. They were moving forward quickly. By the time they get here, they might actually pose a minimal challenge. He snickered to himself. Only time will tell. My only objective is Amane, but if others get in the way of his destiny and my plans, I'll remove them myself. A green aura poured over his body and filled his eyes with power. Another person was watching from a distance as well. Deep within the heart of the forest in Quadrant 2, a cathedral was built by a master chronomancer centuries ago. A woman with black hair and vibrant fuchsia-colored eyes, wearing a ceremonial garb of her predecessors and mentors. Her focus was also on Amane, mainly, but she also has a focus on Toshiro as he was integral to her plan as well. Your powers are manifesting sooner, and you're getting stronger than you were before. Neither of you had unlocked your powers at this stage before. The slight changes in this timeline have proven beneficial to them. Amane has grown strong just by being around his father and mother longer. Toshiro has learned to harness his ice as a response to fear within himself and of his family abilities. She thought to herself as she watched them rest. She smiled at them. You'll need to get even stronger than this if you are to defeat your own demons as well as those from the underworld when the time comes. After watching the group fail and the underworld succeed twice, this has to be the final time. I believe in you, Amane. The boys continued to rest as if it felt like the world was watching them from above and molding them into the warriors it needed them to be. And that is the end of chapter 4, page 109. Next time, we'll start on page 110, chapter 5. Pressures of Death. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you enjoyed these, just hit the like button, share them around, buy the book for 99 cents, and keep up. Book's probably going to be edited soon to correct some of these issues, but right now it's available, and you can get a copy of it before I do any changing. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Catch you guys in the next video.